So the Duchess of Malfi, written by uh, Webster, one of the significant playwrights of the Jacobean period. Which is Jacobean period? Jacobean period comes after Elizabethan period. James the First was the king of England after Elizabeth, and he reigned more than 2 decades. The early uh, decades of the 17th century uh, is called Jacobean period after the name of James the First, who was the king of England at that time. James, this particular name is called Jacob in Latin language, and that is why this period is called Jacobean period. Anyway, this Jacobean period is also referred to as the as the decadent period. Why decadent period? Because after Shakespeare, this particular age, while the different works which were written at that period after the death of Shakespeare, when such works are compared with great literary works of Shakespeare, then it is by the critics it is considered that uh, such works cannot match the excellence of great tragedies of Shakespeare. So it was thought that after the death of Shakespeare, the quality of tragedy uh, actually decreased, and that is why this period after Shakespeare is also referred to as the decadent period. So the tragedy that we are now will be reading uh, actually belongs to this decadent period or the Jacobean period. Anyway, this play is referred to as a tragedy or revenge tragedy, particularly a revenge tragedy. So, what is a revenge tragedy? That is uh, the most important term that we should uh, clarify before our discussion. So, revenge tragedy, it actually became immensely popular in the Elizabethan period as well as in the Jacobean period. So, a particular literary genre, a particular class in tragic plays, which became immensely popular because of its revenge theme. Revenge theme, as we know, that it always attracts the attention of the audience. As we know that most of the movies in Bollywood which are based on revenge theme always become blockbuster. So revenge, this particular theme, which has a kind of a masculine, uh, uh, which is attached to it, that masculine culture. So taking revenge, violence, these always attract our attention because it is actually based on the patriarchal culture. Anyway, in Elizabethan period or in the Jacobean period, uh, similarly, revenge theme or revenge plays became immensely popular when such kind of genre first came into being. When it was first introduced in England. It was highly applauded by the audience. This type of tragedies, which was introduced in England at that time, was actually inspired by the tragedies of Seneca. Okay, which is called Senecan tragedies. So Senecan tragedies actually produced violent and yet somewhat treatments of murder, cruelty, and lust. Murder, cruelty, and last. So these are the most important themes in Jacobean tragedy, revenge tragedy particularly. So revenge tragedy actually dealt with uh, the themes of murder, cruelty, and lust. Okay, so Senecan tragedy was also written. It was actually written to be recited rather than to be acted. So Senecan tragedy, which was the source of revenge tragedy in England, uh, was not actually written to be staged, to be performed. So Senecan tragedies was actually meant to be recited. Okay, but the Elizabethan playwrights thought that these tragedies of Seneca had been intended for the stage. So it was a kind of a misconception on the part of the Elizabethan playwrights that they thought that the tragedies of Seneca were actually meant for performance, but that was not the fact. And they provided this particular model uh, for a fully developed five-act play. So they turned this particular uh, genre into a fully developed five-act play. In Senecan tragedy, the scene of horror and bloodshed is always performed off stage. So in Senecan tragedies, which were actually recited, was meant to be recited, was supposed to be recited, and in that particular tragedy, the scene of horror and violence was never performed on stage. So audience could not see that. Okay. So any scene of bloodshed, any scene of horror, violence were not performed on stage. It was actually uh, narrated in such a way that it has already happened uh, uh, beyond the stage. Okay, so this was the nature of Senecan tragedy, but the playwrights of the Elizabethan period, they completely changed the nature of this particular genre. Okay, so the Elizabethan writers, uh, they actually acted out all those scenes of horror and violence on stage just to satisfy the audience's appetite for violence and horror. As I said, that we all like uh, uh, such kind of thrill uh, or excitement that that is that results from horror, violence. Okay, so they actually the writers of that time, the playwrights of that time, they harnessed such kind of uh, themes, such kind of uh, uh, scene of horror and violence, and they staged it uh, or performed it on stage, and thus they attract the attention of the audience. Thus, the Senecan tragedy developed as now fully developed as a revenge tragedy. So now the Senecan tragedy came to be known as revenge tragedy. Okay, and it is also called in a more sensational way the tragedy of blood, the tragedy of blood. So without bloodshed, uh, there cannot be any revenge tragedy. Okay, so scene of bloodshed, that was very a recurrent kind of theme in revenge tragedy. Okay, so one of the earliest revenge tragedies was Gorbadak, anyway, in which there was a revenge element, And then came Thomas Keat. Thomas Keat was a very successful playwright of revenge tragedy, and his most important revenge tragedy was the Spanish tragedy. Okay, the Spanish tragedy, it was highly sensational at the. It created a kind of sensation at that time, with its scenes of horror and violence, the appearance of ghosts, and many such things. And Shakespeare also drew upon many uh, elements from the Spanish tragedy while he wrote a series of revenge plays. And then came Marlowe. Marlowe wrote several uh, plays based on revenge theme. For example, The Jew of Malta, Antonio's Revenge. Okay. Anyway, now we come to John Webster. John Webster, the writer of The Duchess of Malfi, which is our text. So the revenge tragedy, now we see that after the death of Shakespeare, uh, in Jacobean period, we see that tragedy now suffers a kind of degeneration. As I said, that its quality, its uh, sublimity, its high seriousness suffered a kind of a degeneration. So revenge tragedy that also suffered a kind of degeneration with the hands of Webster. So the tragedy that we are now will be reading, the Duchess of Malfi, is not uh, a kind of a tragedy or revenge tragedy that was written in the Elizabethan age. So it is a different kind of tragedy, though it is based on revenge theme. And in this particular play, that is The Duchess of Malfi, we see that Webster uh, has not taken the features of Senecan tragedy. Okay, so it actually lacks the Senecan features. In this particular play, we see that the main central character of this play was the Duchess, and here we see the Duchess marries her family steward Antonio. So the Duchess, that is the queen, who marries the family steward, that is the servant of that royal family, against the repeated warnings of her brothers. So her brothers didn't like that, and uh, they always tried to resist her by all means. Uh, but she married this particular person secretly, and so they put her to untold tortures. Her brothers put her to untold tortures for this particular deed, and at last she is strangled to death. Thus, the revenge is meted out to an innocent person. So, in this play, we see that this play is, though it is based on revenge theme, but here we see that this revenge is actually meted out to an innocent person, the Duchess. Okay, so here we see that the Duchess is not a villainous character. So, in traditional revenge play, we generally see that the villainous person uh, is finally punished or revenged upon by the hero of the play. Okay, so the central character in revenge tragedy or the hero of the play takes revenge upon the villainous figures. But here we see that this tradition is completely reversed. Here we see that the villainous person is taking revenge upon the innocent person, the main character. So this tradition is completely reversed. In revenge tragedy, we see that revenge is presented as a duty. It's a moral duty on the part of the person who takes revenge. So the central character who takes revenge, he takes it as a duty, as a moral duty, because by punishing the villainous figure, it was conceived that uh, uh, something uh, good has been done, uh, or the poetic justice has been meted out. Okay, but here in this particular play, we see that uh, the revenge is not a duty. So when the brothers of the Duchess takes revenge upon the Duchess, their sister, they do not uh, take this revenge uh, out of their duty, out of a duty or a moral duty. They just do it out of a kind of a passion. Okay, a kind of an evil passion. In revenge plays, we generally feel sympathy with the avenger, that is, who takes revenge. So we generally take sympathy, we sympathize with the person who takes revenge, as in all stories uh, which are based on revenge themes, or the movies which are based on revenge themes. We always have sympathy with the person who takes revenge because we think that he has been wronged. So when he is punishing the villainous figure, we think that uh, he is doing something good. Uh, so here in this particular play, uh, this tradition is also reversed. So in this play, we see that our sympathy is shifted from the avengers to to their victim. So here the victim, who is the victim? Here the victim is the Duchess, and our sympathy uh, goes to her. So this is the unique quality of this play. So Webster keeps our eyes fixed on the stoical Duchess, the central character of the play, and who retains her nobility, retains her dignity and glory, even when uh, uh, even when she is killed by her brothers, or even when she is revenged upon by her brothers. Uh, that is also very different from the general revenge plays, because in revenge plays we see that the villainous person, when he is punished by the central character, we see that the villainous person is presented in a very piteous manner. He is completely defeated, and he is in deplorable condition, and such kind of condition, deplorable condition of the villainous figure gives us a sense of satisfaction that finally the good prevails, finally the evil is defeated. But here we see that the person who is being revenged upon uh, retains her nobility, her dignity, and she dies with all her glory, with all her dignity. Okay, And when she dies, she still retains her dignity and she says, I am Duchess of Malfi still. Anyway, so this was the nature of Elizabethan revenge tragedy or Jacobean revenge tragedy. And this particular nature has been changed by the later playwrights like Webster, who wrote two very important tragedies. One is the Duchess of Malfi, and the other is the White Devil. Okay, and these two plays were actually conceived as a summit of Jacobean revenge tragedy. But this particular play, though it is quite different from the traditional revenge plays, but it still has some uh, conventions of its previous period. For example, here we see that the theme of revenge is retained, and the Duchess is avenged upon by her twin brothers for her remarriage to Antonio. So this is considered by her brothers as uh, outturning the social code, that she is defying the verdicts of the patriarchal society. And that is why she is revenged upon by the brothers. So we see that the Duchess of Malfi, though it belongs to the revenge tradition, it has many elements uh, which are common with the contemporary plays, but at the same time, it is also unique by its own strength. Thus, it transcends the tradition of the revenge plays at the same time by means of its new designs, novel designs, which introduces two set of revengers and sympathizing with the person who is revenged upon. And the play also gives a motive of revenge as a broader social and moral perspective. And there is also a kind of melodramatic nature in this play, as we know that all revenge plays are melodramatic because they all deal with extravagant scenes of horror, violence, macabre violence, cruelty, uh, and satiric elements. So these are all dealt with uh, by the playwright Webster. Now we come to this particular play, The Duchess of Malfi, and uh, as you know, as it is called a Jacobean revenge play, and it was actually performed uh, in the Globe Theatre in 1613. Okay, in 1613 in the Globe Theatre. And in this play, we see that it begins as a love story with the Duchess who marries a person who is beneath her class, as I said, a steward. It was a steward, a servant of that royal family. So the queen, the Duchess, marries a person who is beneath her class, and the play ends with as a nightmarish tragedy as her true brothers execute their revenge upon their sister for marrying a person who is beneath her class. The whole play is set in Malfi, that is a city, Malfi, uh, a city in Italy, though it is now in Croatia. Uh, so Malfi, a city which is called Malfi. So the whole play is set in the court of Malfi. Okay, the court of Malfi, that is in Italy, in 1504 to 1510. So its time period actually uh, uh, moves much backward. Uh, that is almost 100 uh, years back. Okay, so 100 years back. So in the play, we see that the recently widowed Duchess. So the Duchess, that is the queen of Malfi, she was actually a widow. And now we see that the recently widowed Duchess falls in love with another person who is called Antonio. And who is Antonio? This Antonio is a steward of that family, that royal family. Okay, so the Duchess, uh, as she was woman, and again she was a widow. So as we know that in a patriarchal society, there are different rules and regulations and limitations which are imposed upon women, and beside that she was a widow, so there were more restrictions upon her, and as she belonged to the royal family, she also had to maintain uh, some uh, some specific manners, some specific codes and conducts. But here we see that this particular lady, the Duchess of Malfi, she has a kind of individualistic nature, and who has the courage to face the world which is ruled by uh, the patriarchal codes. Okay, and here we see that uh, even though uh, she is a widow, she again marries, uh, that is, she remarries, and she remarries a person who is the servant of that family. So she marries Antonio, a lowly steward, but her brothers, not wishing her to share their inheritance, forbid her from remarrying. So her brothers forbid her from remarrying. So they did not allow her to remarry, as we know that the brothers they always uphold the the codes of patriarchy, the strength of patriarchy. So here her brothers, they prevented her from marrying or remarrying Antonio, and there are different reasons behind that, and we'll come to that period or that topic much later. And she secretly marries Antonio, and she also bears three children. So here the two important characters, that is the brothers of the Duchess, the Ferdinand and the Cardinal. Ferdinand, 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 and the Cardinal. So they are the two brothers of the Duchess. And here we see that this Ferdinand, uh, he is presented as a highly passionate, a kind of a lunatic character, and possibly he harbors a kind of an incestuous nature towards her sister, and she threatens the Duchess. She threatens the Duchess, and threatens her to disown her. And in an attempt to escape, the Duchess and Antonio concoct a story that he has swindled her out of her fortune and has to flee into exile. So here we see that how the Ferdinand and her brother, the Cardinal, uh, takes revenge upon this upon their own sister, just to prevent her from marrying a person who belongs to the lower class, or to secure the honor of that royal family, or to secure their royal estate. Or maybe they killed her because they had a kind of uh, incestuous feeling towards their own sister. So there may be different reasons behind their so much anger against their own sister. So the most important characters in this place are Antonio, Antonio Bolonga, that is his complete name, the Cardinal and Ferdinand, that is the two brothers uh, of that queen or the Duchess, and there are a few others characters. We'll discuss about those characters later. Anyway, so this is my introduction to the to that particular play, the Duchess of Malfi. In our next class, we will study or read the text. Uh, so I think the next in our next class we could be reading the text. So you will be all equipped with the text. Uh, and if you have any questions regarding this particular play or the lecture that I have just given, so you can ask.